I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So for committee meetings, we do not have roll call?
No.
Is that correct? No roll
I don't believe so.
call. Okay. Got it. I was just wondering, do we?
No, I just think it's.
We usually take Tenant. Okay, then we are going to just review the agenda quickly. We will have an invitation for public comment. We have several items for discussion, including review of the June committee summary, employment of employees. We have a first reading of some board policies, as is our practice to consistently review all of our board policies over a 2-year cycle. We will discuss the structure for our board meeting agendas going forward. We will also discuss board protocols and the development of a board member handbook. We will also get an update on the D128 Culture of Care Comprehensive Plan from administration. And then we will discuss future agenda items before we adjourn. So at this time, I'd like to invite, and I'll mention our colleague Jim Batson, who is the chair of the P&P committee, is not here tonight. So I'm filling in for him. So without further ado, I'd like to invite anyone here for public comment to please come forward. Going once. Okay, seeing none, we will move into our discussion. And did everybody have a chance to review the June committee summary?
Yes.
Any comments, feedback? Okay, moving on. Employment of employees. We have several items to discuss.
And under certified staff, we have a TBD for replacement math teacher. And so the person that will be replacing Taylor Sturdivant is Ian Taylor. Ian comes from us, graduated from Lake Forest College and has been working the past few years at Bannockburn School in Bannockburn, Illinois, as a math teacher. So he is the TBD on there.
Right. So we will be voting on these items in the consent agenda
Correct.
at the board meeting at 7 p.m.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
One quickie.
Yes.
Dina Franchi,
Yes.
Physical Welfare, Vernon Hills. It just says Bachelor of Arts degree, Northeastern Illinois University. What, can you tell me what the degree is? And I meant to send this to you earlier. I apologize for my lateness. And you can get back to me later on that if you want to.
He's in the system.
I'm looking in the system right now. Hold on a second.
It just struck me as odd, but you know, they might have an endorsement in physical education, but they have a background in something else. I just wondered.
So her her degree from Northeastern with a major area in physical education with a minor in health.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the employment of employees?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on, we have board policies for a first reading.
Yes. So hopefully in board docs, you were able to see the list of our board policies listed on there. And these are the updates from press that came out. Then obviously attachments on all those are all of our edits from there. So, you know, looking at these, board policy 2230, public participation at school board meetings and petitions to the board. And this was updated in response to some of the feedback regarding time minimums and maximum for public participation, with the minimum times being deleted. It actually makes more sense, I think, the way it gets rewritten, and it coincides with what we've been doing. So it's not going to change anything that we're doing. Actually, I think it reads almost better for the public if they ask what our policy is. Operational services policy 330, chain of command. It's renamed. And just some of the cross references are updated in response to our own internal D128 review. Operational services 410, fiscal and business management. This one is updated in response to continuous improvement changes. And then a style update to the legal references.
Quick question on that one.
Sure.
The ISBE guidelines, can we make a hyperlink directly to those?
Sure.
It's
we're
under,
paid-
it's under budget planning. Um,
I'm looking. Page.
budget planning.
It's
Oh,
on page 1 in the middle, budget planning.
there you go.
It's the first paragraph, not the one that was stricken.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's about halfway down.
Yep, I see it.
Is the hyperlink in the footnotes?
They have, oh, that's a good question, because a lot of the things are listed.
I'll look at that though.
Did you want us to stop at each policy or just wait till the end? So I do have a question about 330, the chain of command.
Okay.
All right, so how, I guess I want to see, I know this is an organizational chart, but how strictly are we following this organizational chart as far as communications, and how is it consistent with kind of our core policy of being able to communicate with anybody on the chart? Does that make sense?
It's a hard question to answer. How strictly are we following it? Like, that's a hard. Do you want to?
Strictly, is it enforced? I mean, is it, you cannot speak to the person above? Well, first of all, shouldn't we have some kind of hyperlink to the chart in the policy? So anybody can see what that organizational chart is. I mean, I know I've seen it because we've shared it before, right? So we probably want to hyperlink to that. I just think we have, you know, we keep talking about an open door policy, and is that going to limit people being, I don't know how to say it better.
So this is for school personnel. Are you talking about board communication with the community?
Oh, no, I'm talking about personnel.
Okay.
I'm talking about
So if somebody has.
if a teacher has a problem, are they not able to talk to the superintendent? That's all I'm saying. I mean, I know we applied pretty strictly and told you can't speak to me about that, and I want to make sure that that's not, I don't expect that to be the environment that we're in.
I think I would describe it as, in general, we always encourage any problem or issue to be solved at the local level. So if it's in a classroom, we would want the department supervisor to be a problem solving coach, but if that's not effective, we immediately would encourage conversation with other people, the principal or the assistant superintendent or someone like that. So I think in general, we encourage problem solving at the local level, but definitely also welcome feedback or questions when that's not working.
I think the sentence there is just very descriptive. Maybe you want to.
Says should instead of shall.
Something, these channels should be followed and no level should be bypassed except in unusual situations. And I know that these have already been approved, right? So I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but it just seems very limited. And it does not foster kind of like the open communication that we've been talking about.
So these haven't been adopted yet. The revisions have not yet been adopted.
They're recommended from us.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I've seen in policies such as this as being very specific and calling out an unusual situation being for any harassment or anything that might involve your supervisor. So I think anything that talks about the chain of command, it's really helpful to let people know that if they're in any situation in which there's harassment or any kind of intimidation, that we encourage going way beyond anyone who might be supervised.
But I think from an HR perspective, having a clear policy in place about the chain of command is helpful when it is breached in an unhealthy way. If you have to direct somebody back to the appropriate person that they should be talking to, it's very helpful to have that policy in writing to fall back on.
Well, that's just my perspective. I think it's somewhat inconsistent with what we've been, if we're gonna have open communication. But that's just. I've seen it applied very strictly.
Did you have some suggested wording or
Language, yeah.
edits?
To the best of their ability, these channels should be followed to the best or the most, something to the effect where it's not prescriptive, and that if you were to change, if you were to go above, it doesn't preclude you from going above. The way it's worded now, you're precluded from not following.
So
the
would
word
that be
change. Sorry.
something like language? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to brainstorm what make it a little
I know, I should have come.
easier to be implemented in a way that doesn't
These channels,
hinder communication and perhaps go ahead if you had a
these
suggestion.
channels should be followed and no level should be bypassed. I don't know where you put the caveat.
Well, your intention is to say, while we have an open door policy,
Yes,
why not say that? While we encourage an open door policy at all levels, we believe that you should start at local level.
Yes.
working with
and I do think there should be some kind of a hyperlink to the chart that we've already discussed, so people know exactly. what it's about.
I'll work on some language on that.
There's no period at the end of that sentence, Brian,
Yeah, I see that.
on what's going on here. We're just falling apart.
It just never ends, right? No period, just. We have English teachers in the room too. Sorry. Policy 470, the legal references were updated in response to a 5-year review.
I have a question there.
Sure.
Part C says, I think it says be designated to achieve before July 1st, 2020, at least 50% reduction in the amount of solid waste that is generated by the district. Do we have any data on that?
That's funny, Dad. That was my same note.
I'll just be quiet next time. So my question actually is gonna come at FNF, where I would like to see a new agenda item to discuss this waste reduction plan. So we can table this until FNF, but yes, what's the metric? How do we measure it? When was it reported?
We collect data on that the last school year. Did we plan to, but then the pandemic reported those plans.
Yeah, July 2020 was crazy.
Follow up on that then.
I like that it's an ambitious reduction, 50% reduction in the amount of solid waste generated by the district.
And that was adopted in 2009. So 2009, that adoption was made to make a reduction by 2020.
Okay, so it sounds like more to come on that one.
Sure.
Okay.
Policy 540, there are just some style updates done to the legal references. Policy 580 was renamed court duty. And just some legal references updated in response to our own internal D128 review. Policy 5240 suspension, that policy was unchanged, just some style references to legal.
Is it a little weird that on those that we say refer to agreement rather than putting it there and having a hyperlink to the agreement.
There's a hyperlink to the
Correct.
agreement.
It just says, go here to see this policy. Why don't we have the policy in our policy manual? There's two of those that have direct references to the contract rather than to
Just
spell
the
out the
language
policy.
for the contract.
Yeah, so, I mean, just copy and paste it.
Well, I guess if you update the contract, then you have to go and adopt and update.
Adopt new policies, like if
Adopt
you,
the new policy in 2 readings.
like
Right.
if you,
That's
if
a
you have
good-
an MOU.
Good point. Right.
the
Because
link
we only
will
look
be
at these every
current.
few years. Sometimes longer, depending on what it is.
So if we update the contract, we don't have to update this policy because the policy just refers to the contract.
Okay, I'm all right with that.
Policy 6140, the policy and cross references were updated just in response to a 5-year review.
I have a quick question about
Sure.
that. And I know this is just an update on the cross-referencing and whatnot, but, where can I find policy-wise, information or policy regarding school fee waivers and free and reduced lunch as they pertain to homeless students? Is that part of this policy or another policy?
So this would be part of this.
And did I miss it?
When you follow the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, and so you're looking for their fees that they're paying. And whether they,
Looking for what, we've indicated as the policy for waiving fees for homeless students.
so then if we go to.
So that's 4140.
The 4140 is the waiver of student fees.
Okay, so it's in 4140.
Do we, well, board docs. Do we reference 4140 in 6140?
That's what I was looking, why isn't that? I'll have to check on why the cross reference in that one.
That for more parents who might check the homeless status.
Let me look on that cross reference.
So not, I'm sorry, I just want to be clear, not only the fee waiver, but additionally how, free and reduced lunch policies then would be indicated.
I will follow up with you.
Thank you, Brian.
6290, just the policy was updated and cross-reference added in response to a 5-year review.
I
think
have
had
a question.
on- Go ahead.
No, I want to wait.
I was so quick to move. Homework, board policy 6290 homework. So I guess my question is about number 3. And getting an understanding of how homework serves as a communication link between the school and parents, guardians. I'm not clear on how homework serves as a communication link.
I think it can show the parents what the students are practicing in relation to a given unit of study. It also, some homework students have completed sometimes in class, or sometimes there's examples, and then there's additional problems or other things for the students to complete. So in that sense, sometimes homework can be thought of as somewhat of a model, if it is sort of a process that they're going through. I think also some people look at scored homework as feedback to students and parents on progress. Those would be the ways I can imagine communication survey. or excuse me, homework surveys. Thank you.
I had another question, and that is, how does this cross-reference to like the grading policy? Because I think how homework gets graded is pretty variable, just based on my very single person's experience as a parent. So does this link up or should it link up?
I think it will be one of the policies that we pull on the table as the assessment and grading committee is doing its work this year. And I think one of the things we heard from students and parents was a desire to have a much more consistent reference point for how homework is assessed, how it counts towards a grade in terms of showing competence. We do have a very wide range of practice in that. So I do think this is something that will definitely be something you receive some drafts on along the way this year. So you'll have an opportunity to hear what the committee is thinking as well as offer some feedback based on what your constituents or your own experiences.
You know, the previous policy, 6280, is titled Grading and Promotion and talks about establishing a system of grading and maintaining records and, you know, how they can be changed if an error is made. So, you know, when you're looking at our policies as a whole, I think that's a logical order, but it still might be possibly indicated to reference
Yeah, I mean,
that.
I think you
Previous
should at least
policy.
add a reference so you know where to go.
It doesn't mention homework specifically in the previous policy grading and promotion. So maybe that's why they're not
Yeah, and
linked
that's
right
why
now
I
because
was
they're
looking at
consecutive.
I was looking at press and they don't have them cross-referenced to each other.
No.
Ready for one more?
Sure.
Also on the homework one, superintendent shall provide guidance to ensure that homework one is used to reinforce and apply previously covered concepts, principles, and skills. It is possible that a teacher could assign something that has not been previously taught as homework assignment. In particular, any teacher that is in a flipped classroom where the instruction happens at home and then they come in and do the tutorials in the classroom as opposed. So I'm just a little worried that that one is contrary to the way some teachers structure their classrooms.
But even in flipped classrooms, homework could be to pre-read an excerpt or an article or something like that, and then the actual discussion or writing something. From how I think about flipped classrooms, it's where acquisition of content is done at home so that the actual work can be done in the classroom. And then that's the work that would be scored, is the work done in the classroom.
Sure.
I think I'm reading this to apply to have a three-pronged assignment and to only teach one of them and then assign and grade the other two pieces that haven't yet been taught is what I think this policy is trying to avoid.
Okay.
But we can clarify it.
Yeah, I just, the literal translation. Well, if we're implying something, then we should maybe get away from an implication, just say it. What exactly do we mean by that? And that was just an example. I mean,
I mean,
it's
you
possible
could-
that you could be telling your kids to go do a research project and they have no background information on the thing that they're just newly discovering. And that's a homework assignment that hasn't previously been covered in class. I mean, you could make it, you could say, oh yeah, but it falls within the realm of biology, therefore. It's, you know, it ties to the curriculum. I just wonder what's the point? Why do we need that in there?
I mean, you could I mean, if you got rid of the word previous, it would just say is used to reinforce and apply covered concept, principles, and skills.
Sure.
I think it still means the same right now. I don't think taking the word previously out changes the meaning. Because again, if you're in a flipped classroom or if you're doing some reading that you haven't covered before and then an assignment in class, I think it's still a little inconsistent.
But if you're doing an independent research paper, it has to still have some foundation that's been covered, right? You're not just gonna give them
Not
a
necessarily.
something completely new.
Well, I think the keyword there is previously covered skills. So we would assume students have some of the basic
Research
research skills.
Right, I
Right.
wondered about that.
Yeah, that's why I think for most assignments we could imagine, we would want at least one of those variables as an anchor point for students where they would be very, very lost. Yeah, it might be new content, but we practice the skill. It could be vice versa.
I mean,
With the content, but it can.
Can we just change the word and to or then?
So you used to reinforce or apply previously covered?
No, covered concepts, principles, or skills.
Yeah.
I
Keep the
didn't
word
read it as
previously.
a checklist. I read it as it could be 1, could be 3, could be 5. Maybe it's not 1, maybe it's 4. So it
Maybe the
didn't seem-
entire,
I didn't read it as homework had to meet all 5 criteria to be considered homework.
oh, that's interesting.
So,
Interesting. I interpreted it that it had to be all of those things. It is our policy that it has to be all of those things.
Yeah, I also read it as all.
well, then in that case, it does need to be the clarifying language.
Do we think that changing that last and in number 1 to or is sufficient to address the concern?
I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out the practicality. You think if homework was assigned and it was a flipped class, a parent, somebody could argue that that was not an appropriate homework assignment.
Right,
Yes.
because it
Well,
wasn't covered in class.
Exactly, and that's something here is, how are they supposed to know what they're doing? Or just supposed to watch this thing? Right now, they're not supposed to know what they're doing, but you have a policy that specifically says that you shouldn't do that. My guess is it hasn't come up too much, but this is new language.
I guess I'm imagining the example of the flipped classroom where you say, watch this 10-minute video. It's a different way of students acquiring content, just like read chapter 4 of Huck Finn. And so I guess I still see it being on there now. If it's to read and answer questions on Huck Finn, then you hope that students are familiar with the type of essay questions, or if it's going to be a character and plot, that they know those vocabulary and things like that. So
Well, if the teacher has autonomy when it comes to what homework they assign grades to and what homework is not for grades. My son comes home and says, I have to do these math problems, but we haven't covered them in class. But the teacher's intent when they go the next day is to review them and not score the assigned homework. Then I think this number 1 makes that confusing. But the math teacher who assigned the problems they hadn't assigned before, but doesn't plan on grading that homework, they just want it done as a discussion point for class the next day. I wouldn't want to say, oh, you're violating the policy, you're not allowed to do that, if that is their method of instruction.
Although there's no mention of grading, there's no scores, and so most teachers are not assigning points to homework anymore anyway.
Well, some are.
Some are,
Yeah.
right. But I think by and large, many are not doing that anymore. Yeah, it didn't sit well. I don't know how to fix it right now, but it's something that I can think about more. I mean, I just read it for the first time today, so.
we also have a
Processing.
DLT meeting tomorrow morning, so perhaps we could bring this language and have a conversation about that with a larger group and then share some options when we bring it back for second.
It's a great idea. Okay, are we ready to move on?
Policy 6330, and this was renamed from boards and scholarships. And then we updated it in response to looking at just D128 review, and it hadn't been updated since 2000. Policy 715, the policy and legal references were just updated in response to a 5-year review. Policy 7270, administering medicines to students, the legal references were updated in response to the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Program Act that was amended by Public Act 101-363. And cross references were updated in response to some of the public acts, requiring districts to adopt or update by 8/7/22 an anaphylaxis policy addressing prevention of the response to anaphylaxis in accordance with the ISB's model policy, which we follow. So, so this policy now is updated. Policy 7285 was renamed, and again, that was updated in response to Public Act 102-413, which required districts to adopt or update anaphylaxis policy addressing prevention response in accordance with the ISB's model policy.
This might also be a nice place to link ISB's policy.
See if they get where that is.
Okay, if it's available.
Yes. I don't know if it's, yeah. I think it was sent to us. I don't know. I have to look to see if that is linked on the website now. We'll do that.
It looks like all the policies that we were slated to do a first reading tonight are complete. Next item D, review of board policies.
This is our review of some of our policies at this time, and we do review policy 4170 yearly, which is our safety and security policy, which just outlines some of our that we have a comprehensive safety security plan with emergency operations. We coordinate with local law enforcement. We have a school safety drill plan in effect, and we do have to report that each year to the regional office of education that we do all of the drills. So from bus evacuation drill to fire drill, tornado drill, to our safety drills, and our safety drill that we have to do within so many days of the start of school. So our policy states it, but then we also have to report that to the regional office of education and fill out forms, and that they check that. So under the drill plan, that's all outlined in there. Talks also in the safety drill about soccer goal safety and AEDs. And we do have AEDs at both campuses in the buildings, and also outside the buildings at some of our athletic facilities. And also because we do have some sports that are off campus, we have coaches that also carry AEDs. Those are checked yearly. We work with a outside organization that checks to make sure that the batteries are charged and that the pads in there are all up to date. So that's a yearly review that myself and the athletic directors. Policy 7180 outlines our prevention of and response to bullying, intimidation, and harassment. We do on our website, both websites, there is a drop-down link right directly to reporting bullying. And so parents and students, it's in a couple places. It's in the student drop-down at Libertyville High School, parent drop-down menu at, both schools. So Libertyville and Vernon Hills. It's got information on bowling, but it also has a link to a form that parents and students can fill out. And when they do fill out that form, that goes directly to both buildings. So even if a Vernon Hills student fills it out, it goes to both buildings and it goes to myself. We review the information that's provided in that, and then we follow up with the students or the parent, whoever filled out the form. Even if somebody fills it out anonymously, there's not much information. We do a lot of detective work to try to figure out, what is going on and do all that follow-up.
And it looks like for Vernon Hills, it's under the student and the parent.
Yep,
tabs.
So both schools, there's a couple places. There's some places that's posted around school where you can also just click on the QR code. So we have many people that have done it from their phones. And, like I said, if they come in, we get notices on those right away. Policy section 2, good timing of this, because it's also linked to our next,
Right.
kind of, board agenda. Yeah,
Oh, I apologize. Can we just go back? really
Sure.
quick? I have a note here, from the last policy. And I wasn't sure if it was clear because it wasn't clear to me, but maybe I'm reading it wrong in the restorative measures section. Which is on page 2 of that policy about, I don't know, quarter the way down. There like specific policy for following up with the, let's call them offending students to make sure that they are sound of mind or safe. How do we ensure that not only is the person who is on the receiving end of the bullying is safe and in a good place, but that the, again, perpetrating individual is not acting out in this manner because they're somehow at risk. And so I guess I'm looking for a policy that's more specific as it pertains to caring for all students. Like certainly we have a low tolerance, if any, for bullying, right? And I know it's hard to sometimes step out of that mindset and say, why is the person who's doing what they're doing that, right? And I'm wondering if we have specific policy that addresses kind of both ends of this situation.
I would say that it's not so much a policy, but our procedures and what our learning support teams are working with, from the team leaders to the counselors, to social workers or psychologists or case managers that, they'll get involved. So if we do get a bullying report, and again, a bullying report might be, we might only have one name, we might have multiple names, we might have both names of students, and that, both students are, our teams work with. There might be some restorative practices that are done in the building levels with those students. But I would say that, both, whatever students are brought up in a manner that they are all being, that our team, so our counselors, social workers, and the team leaders are working with those students.
Everyone's needs are being addressed. Right, okay.
I've seen some schools have that checklist protocol just
Yeah.
to make sure that stuff isn't overlooked.
Yeah.
So that's something maybe Brian and
I-
I can bring to a future meeting, because I think it is important for you to say, well, how is this policy implemented? Because we will be doing trainings with any new staff member, as school starts, so it's gonna be fresh on our mind, so that could be something we bring to an August committee meeting potentially, is just to say, and here's what the LSTs, or if I'm a teacher and I witness bullying in the hallway, what do? We have steps outlined so that all staff understand what their responsibility is, as well as the most expedient way to inform someone else who did the investigation.
And that's one thing that, Armand will be working with, both of our, schools, our assistant principals of both schools and our LSCs to ensure that, those are followed and that we're, so it doesn't matter if the students here at Libertyville or students at Vernon Hills, that we are following the same steps and procedures and that, step and procedures.
that sounds great. I think in light of everything that
And a
unfortunately,
well-being
right?
check for all students involved should be part of that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, section 2, and again, this is on our, 2-year review of all the sections. So, at this point, we're getting to the point where I think some of our board members are seeing things and reviewing them for multiple times, which is great. So section 2 really outlines a lot of the, governance for the Board of Education. How, school board elections are, to be conducted, qualifications of board members, term of office for board members, filling vacancies on, board. And then our board member oath, and that's in 280. So I'm going through this quickly. Hopefully you've been able to, read through this. And also that the board will conduct self-evaluations. That's in policy 290. So the other thing, maybe I just wanted to highlight. Does in 2110 qualification terms and duties of board officers, and you can see, how that is outlined for the president, the vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And then also 2120 board member development, and the board member covers the board member training that is required for all board members. And I know that for new board members, when they came aboard, Carol Scoden went through all of what required board member training. That information is also posted on our website that board members have completed the training. One of them including PARA, which is the Performance Evaluation Reform Act. And that has to do with evaluation of teachers. And if you were ever, board members need to participate in PARA, if you're ever to participate in a vote on a tenured teacher's dismissal. It's also important to know, kind of the what PARA is and the implementation of the evaluation for teachers. And those are the ones that I really kind of wanted to highlight. Some of them. Any questions on section 2?
I had a few questions. In the section about the meeting type, which is 2.200 type of board meetings, it doesn't, we have no description for our committee meetings. And as regular meetings, closed meetings, reconvene, special meetings, emergency meetings. But because so much of the meaningful discussion and dialogue that we have takes place at our committee meetings, I thought this might be an opportunity to potentially fill that gap. That was one question I had, people's interest in potentially adding that category, so the public clearly understands what those things are, things like that. The second question for the board was the policy where it talks about doing self-evaluation, and there's no time constraint on that policy. And I think that most boards try to hold themselves accountable to at least every other year, if not every year, of self-evaluation. And so I, again, just in terms of thinking about good governance and something like that, would want the board to consider potentially adding time constraints.
I think those are both good suggestions. Wondering what the group, let's start with the first suggestion about including wording about our committee meetings.
There's a, on, what is it, 215,
2150.
2150, that there is a little blurb about the special board committees, but it doesn't really go into the details. It just says program and personnel, facilities and finance.
property negotiations, et cetera. Did we want to try and put some words to that? Is that?
Well, I think this is defining membership, where the other policy is defining
Types of meetings.
what happens
What
at
happens at
those
meetings.
meetings.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they complement each other.
So much of the discussion happens in our community that it wouldn't seem to, but we need to include that kind of language.
There is a place that talks about committees in general.
2150.
Right, that's what we're. Sorry, I wasn't there yet.
That was the third question that I had actually was the list of committees here. May not have been updated, and right now we have 3 active committees, P&P, F&F, and negotiations. And some of the other ones listed there, we really don't have or haven't had in my knowledge. So I think that would be one other question for the board. Is that something that we annually want to say when we're doing committee assignments? Are these the committees that we want to move forward with? Is there any other kind of committee that we would want to consider organizing around?
I mean, I would be in favor of updating 2150 to reflect the actual committees that we have, because property number 3 is always rolled into P&P. No, I'm sorry, into F&F, my apologies, into F&F. And I am also, although I'm interested in the idea, I'm not aware either of us having number 5, the Parent Teacher Advisory Committee, although we certainly do have parents and teachers involved in surveys and projects. When we're looking at things, the strategic plan is a perfect example of that. It's not that we don't have parents and teachers, but that specific committee, I'm not aware that
That ever met?
has stood in a very, at least since 2018.
Maria, does this safety committee have parents and students? I thought I recalled Illinois law recommending student participation on the safety committee and parent participation on the safety committee.
Parents on the safety, but I don't think students, I'll have to look that up.
Because if a law does require us to have parents sitting on committees, I think I want those to be indicated here to anything that. Again, as a checklist for us to make sure who are the parents this year who are serving on this committee.
We also have a behavioral interventions committee listed in this board policy 2150, and I'm not aware that that's something that stands presently either.
Yeah, I have to do some research on these, on what is required, and what needs to be in here, so.
So that was the first thing you mentioned about committees, and then
And
the
the committee meetings, having a description of committee meetings in terms of what
what they are, what their
purposes,
purpose, yeah. Is everybody in agreement that we should look at some language
Yes.
to add that? Yeah.
Then the third thing was considering an accountability for board self-assessment with, especially with the new tools now that IASB has and other things. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out process. It can be simple. But I just wanted to note that I thought we would do it if the policy requires, however frequently you want to do it.
Would anybody be interested or object to changing that wording to annually? I think it is our goal to have a board retreat annually and including some form of self-evaluation in that annual retreat. I think instills some greater accountability. What does everybody think about that?
I would be in favor of adding annually. I think it's commonplace.
And I think, this board has started doing that. It's consistent with what we're doing. We just don't have the policy
Right.
to back it up, and I think that's where it should probably start. And then, you know, our good work will be following our policy as opposed to our good work, you know, existing outside of our policy.
I think we should go in the handbook that we will develop.
That's such a good segue. Thank you, Sarah. Are we, Brian, are we ready to move on? Past D review board policies?
Yeah, no, I think I have notes from everything we talked about so that we can look at those. 290, the self-evaluation one, and then looking at reviewing 2150 on the board committee.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, we've got one more item before we talk about board protocols and handbook. I got a little ahead of myself.
We purposely put the agenda together this way. We are all interconnected.
So yeah, board
Yeah.
meeting agenda recommended categories.
Yeah, I'll start with this. Carol and I, Carol predominantly has been coordinating all of the training for all of us and really looking at what board docs has as some recommended best practices, as well as looking at the board doc structure at other districts. And one of the things that we noticed was when we're trying to put all of the information and make it very visible and transparent to the public on what we're voting on, it can be difficult to do that without a for action category. In the past, when we weren't using board docs, we used asterisks and, you know, some other ways, but that really is not the purpose of board docs is to not have to use asterisks, which then you have to have key for somewhere. And so in looking at many other Board of Education's way of organizing their meetings, Carol and I and others on DLT would recommend that for the August meeting, rather than having it be the categories by what agenda items came from the committee meetings, we would rather take the committee meetings products and put them into either for action, for discussion, or for information. So that way it's very clear to the public and to all of you which things we're voting on, the actual wording would be there. I know most of our discussion takes place in committee meetings, but there sometimes is timely things that we have to add. And then for the for information, I thought that could be a place where we shift some of our individual reports, the president's report, superintendent's report, also potentially encouraging each of you. One thing I noticed was most boards have an opportunity for each board member to do a brief report, either I attended this, or I learned this, or I have a question about that. Again, just wanting to make sure that as we're using board docs as effectively as possible, we're considering the use of new practices to get your voice out in the public as effectively as possible.
So this would affect,
And I think we did attach an overview of what I'm describing right now.
so it would effectively do what we have done the last couple of meetings, which is put student recognition right at the beginning, then an invitation for public comment, then the student board reports, FOIA requests as required by law, and good news. The consent agenda would be the first thing we vote on, but I think the notable feature is we would no longer have the structure of P&P committee as its own item on the board agenda, on the regular board meeting agenda. Because all of those items would either be moved into the to vote, to discuss, or for information categories, which I think just makes it more logical. And, you know, I agree that having this superintendent's report and the president's report, I think the superintendent's report is still very effective, just relocating it. And I don't think the president's report is necessary. I think all the things that were covered in it are logically moved to other places, and it eliminates the president discussing those things where they really belong in other categories. And then at the end, if any of us as individuals have something we want to share, we would all have the opportunity to have a report, not just have, you know, a president's report. So
Did you mean by student recognition
So
You
when
mean student recognition or you meant the student representatives?
So I meant student recognition first.
Yeah.
So when we've invited, say, for example, the debate team has placed at state, or we have a diver that has won sections. We invite them and their parents to the meeting. In the last couple of meetings, you may have noticed, we're trying to have those people recognized first, so that if they want to stay for the rest of the meeting, they can, but they're not forced to sit through any other parts of the meeting. Then the student board reports would be separate. That is your
Yeah, but
question?
the student reports happen right after the student recognition is my question.
Yes, yeah,
I think we have it right after invitation to
comment.
public comment.
yeah.
It
So,
makes sense
sorry,
to-
student recognition, then public comment, then the student board reports.
Now, did you plan on revealing this while Jim's not here on purpose?
Knowing Jim, he will be delighted to give up that section.
Jim, if you're out there.
Yeah.
So just functionally, how do you envision the or action items? Because someone has to call for a motion.
Right.
So
So that part would
That
go
would
to
be-
the president.
Okay, yeah,
Yes,
okay.
whoever's in that role.
Yeah, that's, I'm
Yeah.
just functionally trying to envision how that would work.
Other question.
And we would still at the conclusion of each committee meeting, do an audit of, okay, so this is going to the August board meeting for vote. This is going to the August board meeting for discussion. So the committee would still have a really clear picture of what's happening next with that particular topic.
And I think we'll have the opportunity to continue to tweak it if we implement this and we realize that a section needs to be moved or reinstated. We certainly have the flexibility to do that. So we'll pay attention to how it works and solicit feedback to make sure that we're getting it right.
Makes sense to me. I just always assumed that our agenda was prescribed, like, okay, all school boards, this is what you do.
You know, it seems like, and Brian, some of the other longer serving administrators can comment on this, but it seems like that's the way we've been doing it, because that's the way we've been doing it.
Right.
And let's see if there's a better way. Especially one that I think does foster transparency and ease of use for the public. Okay, moving on. Item F, board protocols and handbook. We have several different examples of board protocols and handbooks from other districts. The reason why we have started to think about that, we think that we do a good job of new member orientation, but I think we can do a better job of new member orientation and taking some of the feedback that we've received from board members that joined us in 2021. I think that was really the launch point for thinking, how do we have a manual so that individual board members as well as the public understands how we operate. We have board policies, but this is a little bit different and it's a little bit richer. And it allows us to, certainly make it transparent and sharp with the public, but really try to capture our policies. How does something get on the agenda? I think that's something that,
Right.
we all kind of know, but I think for our board as well as for future boards, it would be really helpful to have a handbook. So Denise actually did a fantastic job of finding some other districts and some wording. Cara had provided one that's also included from another school district in Illinois. I think you got it
Yeah, I got
at the conference, yeah. And
That was very helpful. Nuts and bolts.
nuts and bolts. And I think there are pieces of each of these that are wonderful. And I think what we're looking for, we have a retreat scheduled at the end of August. And one of the goals of that retreat is to come away with some form of a D128 handbook. We'd really like to use that time together as effectively as possible. And I think reinventing the wheel might not be necessary. I think taking a look at what we like, what categories we want to include. And just pulling those over so that when we are together, we can talk about those categories, we can talk about the wording we like. We can talk about things that need to be added. It will make our time together much more efficient as opposed to trying to start from scratch and actually sit down, trying to write it word for word from the beginning. So if we could, I'd like to just briefly get some thoughts about the handbooks that were provided in your packet. Things that you liked, things that you didn't like. Certainly there were quite a variety of categories. And these are all available to the public as well in board docs.
I like the top 10 reasons to become a school board member the best.
Was that the IASB
No, that's the
document?
13,
Oh.
school district, one, yes, school district 13.
Okay,
Kidding aside, I like the collegial way that one is written.
Yeah.
It's
I
very
will-
welcoming. It's very motivating. Talking about some of the legal stuff in non kind of intimidating ways. And very user friendly. These are the things you need to know. These are the resources you have. If you have questions, I particularly like that one, but I do like the top 10 reasons to be.
I have it on good authority from the presenter that we're allowed to steal it.
Okay.
so I will mention that the only ones that we included were ones that were either provided publicly or they live on their website. So we didn't include anything in our packet that isn't available to the public.
Well, you can tell that some of them took the how school boards work from IASB and either put it into their own words, because obviously that's a governing authority and you want to make it as official as possible, but changing some of the verbiage to make it, like I said, a little more collegial, a little better to understand. I like the way that they handle it.
Other
I
thoughts?
did think that was a bit long though. Like most of them tend to be a little bit shorter. So
I have to say though, it was very instructive as a new member.
Yeah.
Not coming onto this side of the table for the first time. I thought it was not overwhelming. It was an easy read. Maybe you were able to,
I look at more of it.
Was
look at it as a
approachable.
reference, like something you can go back to if you need to.
Mhm.
so thorough enough.
Right, and a one-stop shop where, yes, you can go to the IASB information, certainly. But someplace, because when I joined, we had to kind of gather our own tools a little bit. And then cross-reference, like, did this one say the same thing this one did? I do like the idea of a one-stop shop that kind of brings everybody together.
would you suggest that when we meet at the retreat, we kind of have our list of absolute adds, absolute deletes, questionable, and kind of get an idea and start from there?
I think that's an excellent idea. I think we wanted to sort of set the stage with these 3 different examples. And then come together really ready to talk about, these are the sections I really wanted to see included. I don't think this needs to be here. It's already in our policies. Or this is really what's missing. Dan gave me great information. I think some reference to that needs to be in, whatever might be missing in your mind from experiences that you might have had as a member. Whether it was wherever that experience might have taken place. Let's come together, prepared to talk about that.
And I think the identifying the ones that we think are important. I think we have a lot of consistency in that, I think, and then saying, and we all agree with the proposed language. It will be, we think it's important, but we have different ideas on the language. And this will give us time to then really roll up our sleeves and have conversations about how it's working group. We do want to navigate that particular topic.
Yeah, I thought there were some sort of fundamental concepts you should know. And then some were how do you apply them? Like, what should you do during the meeting? Like, I sometimes forget the words. I know what I have to say, but those words don't come out, right? So sometimes I almost want to write it on a post-it note and read that myself, right? So I think we have to,
Don't use the word I in just your.
yeah, we don't use I anymore, right? We have to,
Say our names.
say our name in the third, in first person here, so. I think those types, maybe we have to think about how you organize that way too. It's something I can use every day versus stuff I need to kind of absorb and know.
Right. And I like the idea of it living in board docs so that while we're in a meeting, if we do have a question, or if somebody maybe doesn't remember how to do something, or, someone, say, for example, one of the categories that I saw several times was asking administrators for reports. So if I ask for something, and we all know we've agreed that that's not how it's going to work, any one of the 6 of you could pull up, in board docs, our protocols, and say, well, what we've agreed to is 2 of us have to agree, or you have to request it from the superintendent because it's their job to monitor the workload for their district leadership team. I think the ability to attach it in board docs makes it really user-friendly for whatever it is we might need to refer to.
It's funny, because that's something that we've not needed. That specific example, this group has not needed. Yet I could see so many situations where an unregulated request could be burdensome.
And it could be very well intentioned,
Sure.
but I think having procedures around things like that will really make it easy for everybody to be operating the same way.
And come up to speed faster. There's a big learning curve for this job.
Big job,
There is.
big learning curve.
And
Yep.
anything we can do to help new members come up to speed faster and be effective more quickly is gonna benefit the entire community. So I think this is important.
If it hadn't been for Lisa's suggestion to read The Art of School Boarding, I would have been clueless when I first got here. And I felt clueless anyway, but at least that gave me some onboarding skills.
Right.
Do you think I really thought that the medium was a really easy, approachable read, but also not as, not aligned with the high school district.
Well, and
Right?
that's,
There are a lot of high school district things that come up that were not in that hand, but.
well,
so
that's
I
why I really like the San Juan. If you had a
like
chance to
the
read
San
that one seemed a little bit more geared towards our district in that way. Because I think 13 is great, but it is more elementary, and I thought San Juan.
I still liked the language, but
Yeah.
just to take some of that, like, but would it be worth it to go to our attorney's office? Do you think they would have an example of other things that should absolutely be in a member handbook for a high school?
It's a great
Is it
question.
worth asking?
Yeah.
Instead of reinventing the wheel, I mean, they've obviously had to go through these before.
I think perhaps in addition to, creating a handbook. Even though, I don't know, I mean, maybe the board would agree with this point, that just kind of handing over a copy of the Art of School Boarding is a really useful thing to do in the process of onboarding new board members. I mean, that's been my go-to, primer for the last year plus. And it's not only is it just so comprehensive and full of real life examples, but I don't know, it's just very straightforward. It's an unintimidating text, and I think it distills down what you need to know in under 150 pages. So coupling that handbook piece with perhaps this, really useful piece of reading. And it's just, I think it's also just, it sets the tone for the board's culture as well, when you're all on the same page with that part of school boarding piece. And I think it's just, you're all speaking the same language at a point, right? So
Right. Well, one of the things that we can discuss at our retreat is we can review the set of manuals that we provide to every new board member. And consider, if we all agree, adding that one to the new member package. I'm sure Jim Burchett would be happy as the author to know that we're including his good work in our onboarding process.
I like that they had the list of acronyms, but I'd like to add a list of like terms. Like there's so many things that like come from Daddy's presentations that I don't remember the actual term, like abatement and, you know,
I liked the glossary too.
so. Maybe some of those terms, what do they mean? Like we deferred our taxes, what does that mean? Something like that.
And because it will live digitally, adding to the glossary as we go is probably a good idea.
Or probably keep it a separate document or acronyms separate, glossary of terms separate, and just link so they can be appended.
Well, we are set up to have a rich discussion. Anything else before we move on from board protocols and handbook? Okay, turn it over to you for the D128 Culture of Care Comprehensive Plan update.
Brian did a wonderful job taking all of the end of year documents and applying some of the updates that's taking place at ISBE and prepared for you the draft plan. I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you. So obviously we had a cultural care comprehensive plan in place last year. There's been a lot of changes since last year. So the document has changed significantly from what we had in place last year, but we also did try to refer to or keep some things that were referred to in the document so that people understood that these just weren't forgotten or lost. But just kind of walking through it real quick, our framework really follows what the CDC started last February, and that was presented at one of our board meetings with the community levels. And that everything is based off of that framework. So the community levels that are broken down, and those again are determined from the COVID admissions and the inpatient beds. And that kind of gives that low, medium, and high. And so I try to include how those COVID community levels were created from the CDC. So this is, directly from the CDC. And then how, once those community levels are broken down to low, medium, high, you have your two prevention strategies for masking and for testing. And again, this was last February, and that's kind of what we ended the school year on, but this leads into, this school year. So this guidance then, so ISBE then really shortened their guidance and took it from a lot of different, it was a much, I think, robust guidance, and they really pared it down to be in line with the CDC community levels and then the CDC school guidance. Some of the highlights that I just kind of want to go over. Again, we'll be looking at having people screen themselves at home, and if they're having symptoms to not come to school. And they can do take-home tests, and follow up with our nurses if they have any questions. We will not be, doing any required testing of our students. They can, however, have point of care testing with our nurses if they have questions when they come to school. There will be weekly COVID testing for our staff that are not fully vaccinated, and vaccinated staff can still voluntarily test. We're still going through the SHIELD Illinois program, which is using the saliva test, so that'll be done once a week. And again, SHIELD is offering that to all public schools free of cost. Again, provided that we're meeting the numbers that they have set forth. We'll be working with Passport Health on those weekly tests. Some of the other things that for the 2022-23 school year is still requiring that remote learning is available to those students that are not able to come into school due to COVID. So that will still be in place. So our procedures that we had in place before, that teachers will be notified, and then teachers will set up a Google Meet or Zoom for the students to be able to access the classroom. Some of the other things, again, we'll still have some of the building considerations. We're still going to encourage people to wash their hands, clean the classrooms every day. That's really about, I think all of it. I don't know if there are any questions on anything.
Did you say that we had to be in a contract for the continued testing, or are we just using free Shield now?
So we are working with Shield and Passport Health.
Right.
So Shield, again, it's free of charge. Passport Health is our third-party vendor through Shield. So we're not paying Passport, it's all through free. So rather than us having our nurses or people collect any of that, Passport is doing all that collection for us. There are limits on the number of, we have to have certain numbers of people test weekly. We are kind of right on that cusp of, the numbers that they don't want to come into a school and only test, 5 people and then leave. They have to show that, the time being put in. So I'll have to monitor that after the first couple of weeks. I've talked to Passport, I've talked to Shield, to kind of know what our numbers are. And like I said, we're right at that, and we'll have to reevaluate. They come in for very minimum time, so they're only here for just a little over an hour at one school, Libertyville, and then at Vernon Hills that same day. And the staff that are required to test, again, that's still a requirement under the executive order from the governor that we're testing on vaccinated staff.
So if we don't meet the number, then we would have to pay.
So then we have to start looking at, there may be costs involved, or we're doing self-collection where people are given vials and then they collect and then they drop them off. So we need to, look at that. So then, kind of, moving forward, we, we'll want to share this information, with our staff, and then we'll also want to share it with, our parents and students, moving into the school. So, and, that's right around the corner, but we'll want to send that information here, so. Any other questions?
Okay, so just to be clear. If we are in high transmission, masking should be promoted per CDC guidance. So promoted means recommended. And we would have masks available, I would assume, for anybody who wants one who doesn't have one.
Yeah, so we'll have masks available, as the school year starts at all of our entrances and stuff, just like we did before. Obviously, we get into high transmission, we'll make sure that we do have, masks still available for anyone, and we will promote it, but nothing will be required.
Correct, great. And as you said, you're not collecting vaccination data from students any longer.
We are not, no.
So testing is not required for participation in extracurriculars.
It is not required,
Okay.
no.
Thank you. Just wanted to be sure we were explicit with a couple of those things that, I know there were some parents that were, asking about those things specifically. Okay,
So,
great. Any other comments before we move on to future agenda items? Okay. Future agenda items.
Next month, we will be bringing, update for different data for the equity and inclusion plan. So that will be an opportunity for some of our new staff to also, have the first board presentation with you. So, again, how we similarly provided data and metrics at the April board meeting. It will be other kinds of factors that we're trying to keep you updated on to show progress towards our goals.
Great. Any other future agenda items that we want to discuss for our next committee? Okay, hearing none, then I am going to adjourn the P&P meeting at 6:52.
We need a
Quick break
break or
before F and F, or should we roll right into F and F?
we have 8 minutes. Everybody's okay with that?
Yeah.
We got a lot more to do. All right, call the order of the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, July 25th. We've already handled the pledge. Invitation for public comment. Is there anyone present that wishes to submit public comment? No. All right, then moving on. Review of the F and F committee meeting minutes from June 20th. Any comments or questions? All right. Moving on to bills payable report. Any comments or questions? I know Dan and I talked about I had a question about the permit number. But as Dan explained, we
when you
get
said
that
the
back.
permit number, you mean,
Dollar amount,
okay, I did too.
we get that back.
Oh.
Which you think I would know, having done a lot of home renovations within the village of Libertyville, how that works. But I saw the number and went, wait, a minute, what?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there are things in the educational world that work very differently from personal finance or corporate finance, so it's an excellent question.
So, any other comments about bills payable? This will be part of the consent agenda in the regular board meeting, which will also happen tonight. Okay. Dan, did you have any comments? All right, then. Moving on, capital projects. Summer is our time for the facilities to get their shine and polish because the students are not in, so it's busy for you. Tell us about what's going on.
Well, I give everybody a summary, of projects. The library windows, those were delivered today. Installation will start tomorrow. So everything was prepped on there. Auditorium, wall repairs, we're on time for that project. Be finished soon. Roof repairs, it's just the one small section of roof above the doorway. And then some, metal flashing work that will be completed. Basement repairs are ongoing and we're scheduled to be completed, August 6th. And then, fax remodeling, working with the contractor on their final timing of the project. We're behind on that one. But the school has already worked out a game plan for a plan B if we cannot use those rooms to the beginning of school. So move forward that, and transition build out is moving along. Some setbacks with unforeseen conditions, underneath the floor and things, and some plumbing pipes and stuff, but we've gotten through that and we're moving on, and stud walls are going up, and plumbing's in, roughed in, and electrical work's going on, so it's pretty exciting.
Like I said, busy. We appreciate all the work that you and your team put in during the summer to get the buildings ready for another school year.
When do we think that'll be ready now?
I mean,
When will it be ready?
the transition.
Yeah.
Right now, we're looking at the beginning of October.
Any other questions or comments on? Any project?
And just an update on that. So obviously Transition Pathways is starting in August. We do have a contingency plan and thankfully with the village of Vernon Hills, we are utilizing the Sullivan Center during that time for our transition pathway. So they're starting some stuff with our staff at the district office in our conference rooms, but then also with the Sullivan Center. So, you know, I just want to thank Village of Vernon Hills and the partnership that we're able to start that program and have space for our students moving forward. So,
Yes, very appreciative.
One other thing with the transition program is that may be a good place to take a look at. You know, we usually after we do a big project, kind of tour the space, maybe there's an opportunity to do that once it's completed in the fall.
That'd be great.
Logistically, I'm not sure, because usually the projects we do are at one of the two high schools, and we just usually have a meeting there and just walk over. This would be a little bit different, so we'd have to figure out some of those logistics, but
Field
you
trip.
know, that's something to do that I think would be well worth your time in the fall.
We would like that.
I'm just kind of going by memory here and wanted to call this out, that the VHHS library windows, I think these were like the more energy efficient kind of windows.
Well, the other windows had no efficiency, so they are more energy efficient in that they have some value, but yeah, they're certainly more energy efficient than the piece of plastic that was there before.
Any other questions or comments? Moving on to future agenda items. You know, Don, you had policy question you wanted to add?
Waited until I put something in my mouth, huh?
Future agenda items coming.
Shall I let you finish chewing? I can. Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, just so we talked briefly, capital project, the protocols for that or how to prioritize that, that's coming at a future one. There was another one. Thought we had another one. Denise, did we talk about another one today? Or am I,
Talked about the protocols using for the board to establish capital outlay priorities.
yes,
And then we also talked about related to it, but different would be the policy on fund balance.
oh yeah, thank you. Unbalanced policy as well.
Right.
Sorry, I knew it, so. Sorry.
Okay, so along with board policy 470 research, resource conservation, I am interested in coming up with a more comprehensive district-wide waste management plan so that we are diverting waste from the solid waste that's intended for the landfill as opposed to the solid waste that goes to recycling. I know that we have a plan in motion right now where bins are distributed around the building. Students actually carry those bins or transport them somehow. I would like to see a more comprehensive infrastructure, perhaps to the point of installing compactors for recyclable materials. I know that we are charged, I should say, I suspect that we are charged, because I don't know exactly what our contract is with our waste management. It costs more to take solid waste that's intended for the landfill away than it does to take away waste that is intended for the recycling center. Back at the time where I was researching this some time ago, it was $350 plus mileage plus tonnage to take solid waste away, but it was a flat fee of $150 to take solid waste away that was going to the recycling center. So over time, you're saving money by diverting waste to recycling. And if there's an infrastructure for that, it helps us to push that 50% reduction forward. I would like to see that become a more permanent reduction plan that meets at some cap. Because of course you get diminishing returns if you do 50% every year. Eventually you're gonna get at that flat part of the curve where it doesn't make any sense to even try to. But I would like to see that policy perhaps changed in a way that would accommodate a robust plan for recycling, but that has some sort of terminal point, and maybe investigate how we structure collection of recyclables in the building. I would love to see that become a student project where they do the research and then present to us rather than us do it. Just because I know it's a doable project and that we have incredibly talented kids. But that's just wouldn't it be nice if the education system, like we were actually doing the real world stuff at the same time as we were teaching them math and whatnot. So a future agenda item would be to discuss that in more detail.
Don, just to make sure I'm hearing you right. You're interested in a future agenda item to discuss like a comprehensive plan. But also I heard you mentioning like updating the policy.
Correct. So
Is it both
two different
and?
things. Yeah.
Two different things.
Right. So one thing happens in F and F and one thing happens in P and P. Because building infrastructure into the building would definitely be an F and F concern, but the thing driving it would be policy. And then I'd also, another agenda item, just a brief update on what's going on with VTurk. I'm assuming that they've gotten back to us and we've heard from
With who, sorry?
with the Vernon Township Energy Resiliency Commission.
Verigy?
And did Verigy get back to us? And so we don't have to talk about that now, but I would like to find out where that is.
I was gonna ask about that.
Keep stealing people's stuff. I apologize.
No, I'm glad that you brought that up.
No, those are,
Because you
that's what
were
future
spearheading
agenda
that
items
for
is
us and, for a while have really been our sustainability driver on the board. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Not a future agenda item, but just note, the location for our next meeting in August. It will be a committee meeting and it will be here. But the board meeting will be back at Vernon Hills High School at the end of August, just as a friendly note to my colleagues as well as the public who may want to join us.
this may be a record. Adjourning, were we at 10 minutes? Adjourning F and F at 7:04.
Well done.
Casey Rooney, she's driving it.
Yeah.
So now do we want to do a 5-minute?
Sure.
Bio break?
Currently on break. 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 Currently on break.
Being late, we had our committee meetings. So if I could ask for a roll call, I'm sorry, we have already done the Pledge of Allegiance at 5:30 when we started our committee meetings, so we are not going to repeat that. I'll just ask for the roll call, please.
Jim Batson. Carol Benjamin.
Here.
Don Carmichael.
Here.
Tara Drumkey. Show. Lisa Hessel.
Here?
Sanaa Kulkarni.
Here.
Casey Rudy.
Here. Okay, we note that Jim Batson is absent. Kara Drumkey is momentarily out of the room and will be joining us shortly. So we will review the agenda. First up, we will have a public hearing of the fiscal year 2023 budget. Then we will have communication where we ask for public comment, cover the FOIA requests, and share some good news. The president's report. Do we have any student recognition for tonight? We do not. So we will be skipping over item 4 and going straight to Dr. Herman's report, that includes a strategic plan update. The consent vote agenda includes things that we normally have, regular business of the board, things that we have discussed that we regularly make a part of the consent vote. Then we will have our Program and Personnel Committee review. We have a first reading of some policies. We do have a resolution as well as an intergovernmental agreement, both of which we'll be voting on. For the Facilities and Finance Committee, we will be voting to adopt the fiscally, we will not be, we will mention the fiscal year 2023 budget, and there will not be a vote. More to follow. For reports, we will have a brief mention for the Illinois Association of School Boards, ISB. Do we have anything for CEDAW? Great. So we will have updates on both of those things. We'll discuss future agenda items. We will adjourn to executive discussion to discuss employment of an employee as well as collective bargaining matters. No action will be taken when we return to open session other than to adjourn. So getting us started, first up, we have our public hearing of the fiscal year 23 budget. And I will declare the hearing open. I invite any members of the public wishing to comment to please do so now. Going once. Seeing no one here for public comment, Dan, the floor is yours.
1 second, let me just. We good? Well, hello, everyone. So this is a legal budget hearing that's required by the state of Illinois. Before a budget can be legally adopted, you have to have a budget hearing. You can have a budget adoption the same night as you have the hearing, but you can't adopt it before you have the hearing. As Lisa mentioned, we do have the agenda for adoption on the agenda tonight. However, we are not going to be in a position to approving the final budget tonight. We will have that at the August 8th. The committee meeting, we're going to make that into a special meeting to adopt it then. So stay tuned. We just weren't able to get some numbers finalized for today.
And that still gives us plenty of time in our annual cycle.
For sure. Tonight would have been the earliest I don't want to say ever because I don't really know, but
it's still
the earliest in a very long time that we have ever adopted a budget.
Right.
But by golly, next year. So
we're still very well on track for a very good timeline. So I didn't want there to be any misunderstanding that not approving it tonight was somehow putting us behind schedule in any way.
all right, so this will be similar, although much more pared down to the presentation that we did in June, but much less information. It's really more updated numbers, very similar to a report I sent the board. So just to review real quick for contextualization. So fiscal year 22, which is, last fiscal year. What I want to show you is we had a surplus in the budget of 328,000. Now that's not how the year ended up because there's more that goes into that, but our budget in terms of an operating stance had 328,000. So that's a very, very close margin. So now a review of the updated tentative budget. I'm going to be focusing on operating funds here that we've talked many times about. So hopefully you're very familiar with operating funds. That's all of our funds, except I take out capital projects and I take out debt service. We don't have any debt service, so I take out 0 for that. And for capital projects, I take that out because those are really very high fluctuating numbers depending on what major projects we have. So those of you who have been around for a while, we sometimes had $20 million a year for the pool or whatever project we were doing. This year, really our project is the transition program, which is a $2 million program. So that line varies greatly. So we kind of remove that as an outlier because it really is a true sight for you to see in terms of how this district really does run on a year-to-year basis. However, we still do have a capital projects fund and you need to know what's in them. $2 million for the transition program that we know is in there. And then what I have is a placeholder of $500,000 for the start of some undetermined project that would start summer of next summer. So we would have design costs, stuff like that. We don't have that project identified right now. But we usually run into, we're going to look into doing a large project. This is money to start. So, so here is almost like the highest level I can show you of our system and our budget. So the revenues is divided by the different funds we have. And then it's divided by revenues and then expenditures and then the different objects, their salaries, their benefits, those are just the numbers. And so really the takeaway to see is the total budget is 100 million on the expenditure side with a total deficit of 4.3 million. That includes capital projects and then the operating funds. Oh, sorry. The operating funds would show a deficit of 1.8 million. So the total being a deficit is misleading because like, wow, we're overspending by 4.3 million. Technically we are, but we're using fund balance to pay for a project. For the last several years, we've had a fund balance. We've had a total budget deficit because we've been spending cash on these massive projects that we've been doing.
Do you mind repeating that last part about why we have that surplus or deficit? Because I think it's clear, you went over it pretty quickly. Do you mind just repeating that one piece?
Yeah, on the 4.3 million, the reason that exists is because it starts with that whatever your operating surplus or deficit is, and then it is either mitigated some or enhanced by capital projects that you're doing. And so the way that we have paid for our capital projects have not been by additional taxing of your community. It's using basically the money that's in the bank to pay for that. And so because there's no revenue, it's already in our bank. The expenditure shows the money coming out, but there's no money coming in to offset it. The money's already here. So, but on the operating side, there is a deficit of $1.8 million in the fiscal year 23 tentative budget, this version. It's a little bit different than the previous version, but I sent you information about what were some of the assumed changes that would have made that change, but those are all reasonable, I would say. This was an expected deficit. You would never want to see a deficit in your operating funds. A deficit year over year, that's spending more money than you're taking in that year. So think of you personally, if you spend think about monthly, right? Most people live monthly, right? If you spent more money every month than you take in every month, eventually you're going to run into a big problem. You're going to run out of money. And then you have to figure out what to do. No different than a giant organization like this, where if we constantly had a deficit and we're spending more than we're taking in, eventually you'll run out of money and then you have big problems. We saw this coming primarily because of our projecting and the change in accounting that we did for our property taxes, that now they're aligned. So not one year is going to have multiple CPIs. It's one CPI for 1 year, which is going to be much more simple to budget for, simple to explain, simple to understand, I think. That said, the biggest reason for this is what you will see. Revenues are not increasing as fast as expenditures for next year. Expenditures are going to increase at a higher rate than revenues. And that's what's causing this. But we do anticipate this to be a 1 year issue. After this year, we believe it'll go back to being a positive number. So this is, again, a summary sheet that you already have on revenues. What I would point out is total revenues going up about 1.17%, but that is a bit misleading because that includes removing food service. So, right, we talked about Quest is coming in. We're very excited about Quest. We approved that contract at the last board meeting, right? And so we're very excited about that. And with that, we're not going to get the money in anymore from lunchrooms. It's going to go to Quest because Quest is going to manage that program. So that $1.2 million has been removed as a revenue. So it looks like revenues are only going up 1.17, and I'm saying that's not truly what's happening. What's truly happening is it's closer to our revenues going up 2.36. So call it 2.4, which the bulk of our revenues come from property taxes. So the biggest driver in property taxes is whatever CPI is. The CPI, so all of you are very aware of inflation, right? Inflation being 8-9%, right? You kind of hear it every month. The CPI that we are able to access for property taxes is based on December of 2022, based on December of 2021, which that was a 1.4 CPI. So what I'm saying is next year, the revenue we will receive will go up by 1.4% in property taxes. Now, new property that's brand new, that will get added on top. That's a different thing. And that's added in, so that's actually there, and you see my number, instead of 1.4, it'll be 1.7. So it's a little bit more money, but not a lot. And then there's a few other things happening. So since the last version, what I've updated here, I believe was CPPRT. I updated to add another 100,000 to that. And we've talked several times about CPPRT. We had a very large CPPRT this year, which is absolutely an outlier. We've never received anywhere near that much money before. And no one knows what we will get next year. I'm telling you, no one knows. If they say they know, they're not being accurate. It's honestly a guess. So I'm budgeting for the second highest CPPRT that we will have ever received, but we honestly don't know. So, but I'm leaning more towards it's going to be somewhere in the middle between what we got last year and what we usually would get. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle between there. That's really the only update since the last version of what you saw from this. So revenue is going up 2.3%. On the expenditure side, so a lot of numbers. I'm sorry I didn't circle the right ones that I wanted you to see. This is also in the report for you. So this is showing a 4-year trend of salaries and benefits, and then the budget. This is all funds. So this is going to match the other one. But the question is, all right, what are the numbers? Then the question is, how did the numbers change? Right? So what are the numbers, and then how did they change? This is trying to give you a first chance of here's the numbers, and then the next tab I'm going to show you is how, well, this is all funds. But again, I'm going to focus on operating funds. So this is all funds combined, so you can see. But then I'm going to switch it now to operating. Okay, so now this is operating funds, what our expenditures are budgeted, what the actuals have been, everything like that. But really what matters is how they're changing. So this next slide is really my last slide that I really want to show you what's happening. So there's a couple things happening here. So the first area that you can see, if you can see my mouse there, is the first category of analysis that I have here is what was the percentage of fiscal 22 was actually spent versus budgeted. And I think it's really exciting. Salaries and benefits came in at 99.65% of budget, which is really hard to do. So the system we had worked great for that. We had some things come in a lot, there's more detail in other reports. There's some things that came in higher than we thought. Substitutes, for example, crazy higher, some things coming in under, but the net of it all working out was extremely tight. Other expenditures, which would be more like our department budget, so that's supplies, services, tuition, those kinds of things. Those came in under budget at 94%. And that's the thing that we're getting much tighter on next year. That's being reflected. So I think those are all that's all really great news. Then if you look at the next column, budget change. So how is the budget changing? This is really where the real numbers are. This includes, sorry, it's hard to see because the written report will give you more information. This report right here, 3.43%, that is the actual change in operating expenditures. However, that includes food service being removed. No, that includes food service in. So it's artificially lowering the increase. If I remove food service from the equation, the true increase right now is at a 4.7. That's when I remove food service. But for you to see past that and see what's really happening on the salaries and benefits, that budget change 6.72. That's budgeted. Everything else, like truly, is like really, really close to flat. And that was a lot of the discussions that we've been having as with departments as a DLT. We've been walking through these numbers. Now, some of these numbers will change for the final version of the budget, but at least this was the tentative budget that I sent to you earlier this month. So the total net change truly of 4.77. So that's where we're at with estimates for the budget, and that's then also the change in actuals you can see there as well. A big thing to know is, this is got assumptions in there. It's got also the new staffing that we've talked about, like our new administrators, the additional teachers that we're having, bringing in the transition program. So those are additional staffing. That's all part of that too. So all of those things are baked in. There's a lot of numbers that go into these numbers, right? In addition to that, what's included in here is the contingencies that we've talked about, but I've updated the contingencies. So we have really two contingencies. One is $100,000 contingency for strategic planning. So that is doing something in response to a strategic plan. So that is unknown right now. Like we have an adopted strategic plan framework, right? And then we're going to develop more specific action steps. But because we don't know what those are right now, and we don't know how much those cost, we didn't want to wait a whole nother year before implementing anything. So we stuck 100,000 as just a guess. To be honest, we don't know. To be able to start something this year. Secondly, because the other expenditures are basically flat, we've had a lot of really good conversations. And I am budgeting some things tighter than I would normally feel comfortable doing. And I've seen enough of them over all of our district line items that having a contingency set aside in case I'm wrong on some of these things, or in case something else comes up, I think is going to be extremely helpful in us navigating this next year. So that contingency I increased from 100,000 to 150,000 after I completed all of my conversations with the department. So we have 150,000 contingency, which, to be honest, on a $97 million budget is not a lot of money. I mean, 100,000 is a lot of money for sure, but like relative to $97 million, it's very small. But I think that gives me enough comfort and flexibility.
So you mentioned two different contingencies, and I just want to be sure I'm clear. So can you tell me what two categories the contingency amount falls into?
The first category is strategic planning,
Yes,
100,000 for that.
Mhm.
The other is 150,000 for general operating contingency.
and is there a placeholder for a 5-year capital maintenance plan anywhere built in?
You mean a placeholder? I'm not sure I understand the last thing you're asking me.
So we haven't fully developed the capital maintenance plan,
Mhm.
so there wouldn't be a specific dollar value. So I'm wondering if there is, just like there is earmarked for the other categories, is there somewhere that's also earmarked for potential future expenses related to that capital maintenance plan?
Yes, there is. I'm not calling it a contingency because it's a different, slightly
Right.
different in my mind.
Yeah.
The bulk of the capital projects that we have in this budget, we've talked about a while ago, and they're all happening right now. Those summer projects that he updated with you at the
Yes.
committee meeting. The one thing that is in here is the 500,000. So the thing that's like not very specific is $500,000 for an undetermined project starting summer 2023. But
And
that's
that's
not
separate from the-
operating. That's part of the
I see.
total. So like, it's
Yes.
not in the operating budget. It's a separate
Got it.
thing.
Thank you.
So. Yeah, so that's where we're at with our tentative budget. Right now, so,
Questions? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to declare the budget hearing for the fiscal year 23 budget closed. And we will move on to communication. Do we have any members of the public wishing to address the board? Okay, seeing none, do we have any email public comment?
We do not.
Okay, moving on to FOIA requests, please.
This month, we received one FOIA, and that was from Paul Phillips from Public Data Research, requesting copies of all D128 employee first name, last name, and mailing information. It was completed on the same day, and we spent 15 minutes.
Great, thank you. Moving on to good news.
We also have some great things happening in the district, even though school is not in session. D128 students and staff are doing great things. Members of the Vernon Hills FBLA team competed at the FBLA National Leadership Conference in competition that was held locally here in Chicago, June 29th to July 2nd. The following students placed nationally in their respective competitions. Kandar Fasia and Ruhi Subramanian placed second in Intro to Business Presentation. Pranav Swathmurthian, Anthony Smithkaloff, and Gavin Mavagaskem placed third in Hospitality and Event Management. Andrew Tikhonov placed eighth in Personal Finance Objective Test, and Brandon Newman, Joel Kim, and Andrew Adiro placed eighth in Entrepreneurship. VHHS Special Services teacher Danielle Robner has been chosen to receive an Illinois Teacher of the Year Award for meritorious service from the Illinois State Board of Education. Her award will be celebrated at Those Who Excel and Teacher of the Year banquet on August 6th at the Bloomington Normal Marriott Hotel Convention Center. And lastly, D128 received a letter of thanks from the Village of Vernon Hills for its support for the Vernon Hills July 4th celebration. This year's D128 was able to support the celebration by providing housing arrangements for the award-winning Colts and Colt Cadet Drum and Bugle Corps from Dubuque, Iowa, which included 150 young adults and parent volunteers who traveled with multiple tour buses, tractor trailers, and several passenger vans. The message from the village noted, a special thank you for allowing us to use the Vernon Hills High School to accommodate the group over the 4th of July holiday. Please express our sincere appreciation to John Fiscal for coordinating the space to accommodate the bands and for his patience and expertise in assisting our staff with arranging the band. Finally, please extend our sincere appreciation to the custodians, Alejandro Bravo, Ago Leon Nunez, and Jose Bobby for being available to the groups upon their arrival at schools, and their supervisor, Jamie Cantu, who worked on his days off to coordinate the schedule changes, as well as VHS Director of Buildings and Grounds, Jose Medina, who helped the original planning and made the rental possible. We certainly appreciate everyone's patience and dedication. Your generosity to help make this year's parade a success is greatly appreciated.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I really thought that was wonderful that they specifically named the members of our custodial staff and our building and grounds team who, really showed what D128 is all about.
And can you tell us the name of the special services teacher that won the ISB Teacher of the Year Award?
Yes, Danielle Robner,
Danielle,
Rogner.
fantastic. We are very proud of Ms. Robner, and on behalf of the board, congratulations on that.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Okay,
Dan, can you call up a presentation for me for my report? Sorry about that. I was going to ask you to do that before you shut it down.
it's possible, if you would like, we could approve the consent vote agenda and then go back to the strategic plan update. We'll give you a time, just a beat to bring that up.
Yes, the one I shared this afternoon.
So I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent vote agenda as presented. Please say your name first.
Drumkey, so moved. Rooney, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Benjamin,
Aye.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Drumkey,
Aye.
Hessel,
Aye.
Pocarni.
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Great, motion passes. And we will go back to number 5 for the strategic plan update.
So one of the things that I intend to do is probably monthly provide during my superintendent's report updates with progress in general of moving forward with the strategic plan. We will also have presentations and more fully developed descriptions of the work. But I definitely want to make sure that, I'm committed to making sure the board is very clear on what we're doing on each of the 3 goal areas. So one of the things that I did was to capture the conversation that we had last June, 27th. And this is my Google drawing things. We have also contracted with a much more skilled graphic design person who will make version 2.0 much more beautiful than Denise Herman's version 1.0. But I think one of the things that I wanted to capture and that you all were so clearly articulating is, as we were talking about the 3 goal areas, equity and inclusion, health and well-being, and exploring multiple paths, and then looking at, because those are big, complex things, not one action plan is going to take care of them. So we were looking at the data and you were brainstorming and encouraging us to consider some action plans that you felt particularly drawn to, or again, as an educational leader, would encourage us to continue to explore. And you also noted how they overlapped. So that got me thinking about this Venn diagram and then placing the action plans that really you supported us moving further on this way. And it showed that very few of them are in only one category. Several of them, if we choose to adopt a daring portfolio, or if we choose to adopt some of those things that will not only be moving us forward in one goal area, but also in a second goal area. And it will be the action plans themselves that dictate what kind of metrics we're going to be using, and other things like that. But I just wanted to give you a visual summary of our conversation and know that it will become more and more beautiful as the professionals get to work on it. Next slide, Dan. I also wanted to update the board on what we're doing to communicate the approved strategic plan to the community as well as the staff. Actually, I believe it was today, I sent my back to school letter to the staff and invited them to our launch party. That was always a sad day. I know, I waited till it was only 2 weeks away. So I know. So that's one thing. So they understand that this is going to be one of the things that we celebrate at the back to school opening event. Next Monday, we have all administrators returning, and we will go through a similar presentation to what the board had and take even a deeper dive, because it's important to me that all administrators in the district be able to answer questions, know where we're going, and feel like they're playing a role in communicating and leading this work as well. Our opening day will be on Tuesday, August 9th, and we intend to have a party, and all board members are invited to attend that party if you would like. I know the staff really enjoys getting to see as many of you as possible. If it works for your work schedule, we have breakfast at 7:45 in the morning, and then the meeting will start at 8:30 and will be concluded by 10. And again, if you can only stay for a portion of that, that would be fine. During that time, we will focus on the 3 priority goals. We will also give the general timeline that we reviewed. We're going to invite participation, like we talked about with the staff, in helping to map out those detailed action plans. We will make sure that we make it engaging and make sure that the staff feels like they're connected to the agenda items. And then we also are going to close by using a thought exchange to gather voice and ideas from the staff that will then be used to move forward our work on our first Institute Day, which is September 6th. So this will also be a day where, staff understanding the 3 goals and the potential action plans will have some really intense time to do some digging, give us some preferences. You saw some of the things up there that were ideas about wellness centers or increasing access to mental health. What specifically will that look like? We saw some things up there about improving access to social emotional learning or an advisory program. What specifically will that research look like? So we see that being a very important day for staff input. We also set the goal of having all of the action plans to the board by December, so that, again, as Dan talked about, we don't want to have a whole nother year go by without having movement forward on our action plans. So we will have those to you. And then once approved, we will have another Institute Day for events that might take coordination between both buildings. And then one other thing that we did commit to have to you at our May meeting, in addition to the strategic plan, would be the assessment and grading policy that we intend to have provided back to the board by the end of the school year.
Can I pause there for a
Mhm.
second? Just to make the connection, that contingency budget, part of that is because if we're going to look at freshman mentor program, for example, we'll be
Yes.
sending teachers out to go examine other schools.
Mhm.
That budget is where that money's being spent.
Absolutely. Thank
So
you
we
for
can
making.
see the connection between
Mhm.
this plan and that budget.
Yes.
I have a question on the action plan.
Yeah.
Are we to anticipate you'll have like 3 goals, so 3 action plans, or do we have multiple? And then do we have to start thinking about prioritizing the action plans themselves? I'm just trying to sort of.
Well,
set
I think we
myself
would,
up.
again, that's the beauty of going into the details of action planning is trying to coordinate what resources would we need? How much time would this take? And so that would be for between teacher feedback and people who will be responsible for doing the work to do that audit. And say, we brainstormed 3 goals and 3 action plans each, but when we mapped it out, that would stress the system too much. So that's one of the things that we would bring to the board then is to say, for our equity and inclusion goal, here's the first importance, or the one that we think will move the lever the greatest under health and well-being. Here's the action plan that we feel will give us the biggest bang for the buck. So we will definitely bring to the board action plans that have, timelines, persons responsible, resources required, so that you have a very informed decision to make about approving or asking us to scale back some of them.
And that, that decision, if you will be made in December, but I am assuming we'll hear information about it before.
Absolutely. I'm trying to model
Yep.
what our, what my monthly update will include is the actual process. We might also have some of the action planning teams come and give some presentations even in October or November to the board to gather feedback from you as a stakeholder group. We intend to, again, really front load the feedback we're receiving from the staff in September. And then also use some of our new communication tools and other things to make sure we're getting student voice as well as parent voice in September and October, and then really putting the plans together in November to bring to all of you.
And I think in December, that gives us the opportunity to have enough time to see some of the pieces of the budget that we just can't put in yet. For example, the longer term capital maintenance plan, the collective bargaining agreement, that, all of the decisions that we make about the strategic plan and funds exist in the context of the greater budget that we have. And we'll have to have really thoughtful conversations that don't exist in a vacuum, but by December, we'll be able to take a step back and look at the whole picture so that we know where those items exist in relation to other line items.
It will also help some of our departments and programs help with their budgeting process that starts in January. So, once we're clear on some of the things that are going to be action plans, that will help each individual person who manages a budget make some of their own priorities cleaner and quicker for decision making.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we have enough time to go through all of that content. So just wondering, how should that 12 meeting be? So we get enough time to go through.
Well, I would want that to be where you're seeing draft action plans sooner than that. So that would not be a surprise where you're seeing something for the first time. And I would definitely give the board as much time as possible. So not just the weekend that we post some of those things. We could definitely, as soon as they're ready in November, give them to the board for pre-read and opportunities to ask questions before we have the discussion.
Sounds great. That's all. Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Thank you. So we are now in number 7, Program and Personnel Committee. We had our first reading of some policies at our earlier committee meeting. So these will be our first reading for our board meeting.
And we had, so all the policies are listed on there that, our first reading, we had a good discussion on all these board policies. Some questions from the board during our committee meeting. We will follow up and get back on those questions and comments at our second reading at our August 8th committee meeting. And then for second reading, and then they'll be presented at the August board meeting for second reading and approval at that time. So all of those policies are listed and presented.
Thank you. And because we did read and discuss them at length at 5:30, we are not going to do that again tonight. We'll move on to item B, resolution to regulate expense reimbursements for board policies 2125, board member compensation expenses, and policy 560 expenses.
Yeah, so this is as required under board policy 2125, a resolution to regulate expense reimbursements. And we do this yearly in July since our fiscal year starts July 1 and goes through the end of June. So this was approved last year in July, and we are presenting it again this year, same resolution. There were no changes to the resolution that was approved last year.
Okay, great. Then I'll be looking for a motion to approve board policy 2125 and 560 as presented.
Carmichael, so moved.
Kulkarni, second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
So
Okay,
the expenses one just stays the same as the
Mhm.
policy that we have on the books.
yep, no changes.
And just for reference, this resolution is also linked in our board policies on 2125.
Great. Thank you. If we have no further discussion, roll call, please.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Drumkey.
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye.
Kulkarni. Aye. Rooney. Aye. Benjamin. Aye.
Great, motion passes. Moving on to item 7C, District 70 Intergovernmental Agreement.
So we have already entered into a shared data was sharing agreement with District 68 and District 73. Timing of this, now we're entering into one with District 70. They have already approved it at their board meeting in June. And this is one presented and for you for District 70 for tonight for approval.
Great, can I have a motion to approve, please?
Drumkey, motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement with District 70 for the sharing of student data for educational study.
Carmichael, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Drumkey.
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye.
Kulkarni. Aye. Rooney. Aye. Benjamin.
Aye.
Carmichael.
Great, motion passes. This is the place where normally I would turn it over to Chairperson Rooney for the Facilities and Finance Committee, but seeing as though the only item is the adoption of the fiscal year 23 budget, which we are tabling, then we will move right on to reports. You definitely win for the shortest committee for the evening. Well done. For IASB, please note we have two events. The joint annual conference, which will take place November 18th to 20th. Same weekend as always before Thanksgiving. We always enjoy attending as a group and certainly encourage everyone, if they're available, to please make time in their calendar to do so. We will be sending out this form. It was sent via email, my apologies. Carol sent it out, to look for that in your board email. And we're looking for a response by August 8th,
Yes.
by the committee meeting. If
Does
you-
that also include the pre-conference So we
Yes.
know what the titles of all of them are.
Yes.
Should we
and-
coordinate that in any way? Should we-
So we always do talk about coordinating so that we're attending different workshops and then
Right.
we can share information. So yes, maybe as a future agenda item, we could talk about that closer to the workshops because, we do have to. Oh, no, we only have to, this is the pre-conference
Right,
workshops
right.
that we have
One on
to,
Friday.
for, by August 8th.
They
But
do
s-
fill up quickly.
Yeah.
So that would be
The
one
pre-conference,
thing
which
why
is
the
why-
timing is pretty important on,
That's for the
on this.
Thursday date, right? Or
And Friday.
Yeah, there are Thursday and Friday pre-conference workshops. And then the conference technically, the bulk of it takes place on Saturday
Saturday.
and a little bit on Sunday. So I think the workshops that we want to coordinate are the ones that take place on Saturday, correct?
I was actually thinking Friday.
Friday.
Oh, okay. Yes, so we could add that.
Because those are the half day, excuse me,
Yes.
the half day ones are the full day ones.
Right. That's right. Okay, so maybe we'll add that to the agenda for P and P. Yeah, where we can discuss who wants to attend which workshop and we'll coordinate that. Okay.
So look them over beforehand to get an idea of what's,
Yes, what's of interest, what we think might be pertinent to our board and to our district.
And I think it also will be helpful for Carol to know if you do know yet, if you'll be staying overnight and things like that to get the hotel reservation squared away and things like that. So the more information, the better for us for planning.
Great. The other ISB, there is two save the dates went out with Lake Division meetings, one for Wednesday, October 12th. The topic will be communicating with legislators and advocating for our districts. Also Wednesday, March 8th, there's a speaker from IASA talking about telling your district story while building a strong community through effective board superintendent relationships. Both of these events can be found in board docs. If you go to the top and to the library and click on events, you can see all of these events. And that is all we have for IASB. Moving on to the CEDAW update.
Just a small one. As you may recall, the original June meeting, I think I had reported on this last time we met. The original June meeting had been canceled due to the fact that there was
Not a quorum.
not a quorum, no voting body available. And it was rescheduled just before the July 4th holiday weekend. We actually, full disclosure, were not able to have a representative at the meeting. I was out of town. Everyone else was kind of tied up too, but I reviewed the minutes and it seems that the only major things that there was a lot of business that had to be passed. It was a large agenda, but any major things, there were just some new appointments made to the executive board, so some changes there. There was a presentation and approval for the tentative budget for the upcoming school year, and the plan is to adopt it next month. And then they also established meeting dates for the upcoming school year. So if anyone is ever interested in attending, I mean, I'm there as consistently as I can be, but if you're ever interested in coming along and learning more, it's interesting. And it's important that, you know, we do recognize that our district students attend BC Doll schools. So sometimes it's nice to have a good understanding of how those programs work. And then additionally, there was an extension of a collective bargaining agreement with the SSSA, which stands for the CEDAW Support Staff Association, as well as some MOUs for both the SSSA and the CEDAW Teachers Union. So just some, you know, stuff that they took care of on that agenda. But it was important that it was approved and moved so that they could get going on their plans for the school year. Well, is that?
Okay, thank you. We really appreciate the time you take to be our
Sure, I
representative.
feel
to
really bad.
CEDAW.
I feel bad I couldn't be there, but it sounds like a quorum showed up and they got done what they needed to.
Exactly. Okay, great. Any questions about CEDAW? Okay. Future agenda items, we already covered the joint annual conference, pre-conference workshops that we'll discuss at the next committee meeting on August 8th. Any other future agenda items? Okay, then, if I could, it's, the next thing says adjournment, but I think we're looking for a
Yes.
motion to move to executive
Yes.
session, not to adjourn. So if I could please have a, that's okay. We're still gonna ask for a motion to convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing employment of an employee as well as collective bargaining issues.
Rooney, so moved.
Benjamin, second. Thank you. We are going to convene in closed session immediately.
So good.
Hessel,
Aye.
Kulkarni.
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Carmichael. Drumkey.
Great. Motion passes.
Recording is back and audio is back.
Excellent. So I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to return to open session.
Carmichael, move to return to open session.
Rooney, second.
Great. 8:47 PM noted. Roll call, please.
Kulkarni.
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Drumkey.
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye. Motion passes. So we are back in open session and I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Drumkey, so
Eight.
moved.
Drumkey moves.
Hold on. Okay, now to
Drumkey, I move to adjourn.
Carmichael, second.
Roll call, please.
Rooney.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Drumkey.
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye.
Kulkarni.
Aye.